At a recent mastermind, I gave a presentation detailing our entire sales framework that my own sales team that does 2 or 2.5 million a month per month uses. So this is everything I not only use to do $500,000 a year in Connect commissions when I was a full-time closer, but at the same time my sales team uses now. We're gonna break this into 3 parts. And the first part is all about the right sales philosophy, mindset, and beliefs, and kind of looks at the sales process for a high level. So enjoy the video. I discovered that there's 7 buying beliefs. And then on the inverse of that, there's also 7 limiting beliefs that keep people from buying. And what happens is, if through using your skilled questions in your discovery phase of the call, you can basically break down the limiting beliefs and reinstall the empowering beliefs before you transition to the close, they'll look at, instead of you having to hard close the prospect's gonna close themselves, okay? And view you as a leader and not a salesperson. And so this presentation is really about all of that. We're gonna cover essentially how to create an objectionless close, okay? And the thing about these 7 beliefs is this is just my model and my framework of explaining sales as I see it. Now, is it the only framework? Is it the truest framework? No, there's plenty of great frameworks. But what I will say is I've never found a sales process or a salesperson who's great who doesn't use this. Like everything kind of fits into this. So it's really teaching you the right philosophy so that you have a deep understanding of actually what's going on, and then the tactics can come after that. So what we're gonna cover is the 7 beliefs, how to build them, and then also the entire sales process. So I'm just gonna walk you through basically the call from beginning to end. And this is really the first presentation I've ever made. I know the training has some like this, and a lot of this is gonna be reviewed from the training. I think we're gonna go deeper in some areas, and we can go over questions and such, but this is the most condensed version of the sales process I've ever taught. So I think that'll be really, really good just for like an hour that we can go through all of this together. So 7 buying beliefs. I think you guys probably know what a lot of these are if you've been to the training, right? So the first one is pain, okay? So there's 2 types of pain. This isn't in the training. This was recently, I always knew this, but I've never really explained it this way until recently. There's 2 types of pain. There's a problem, easier way to think about it. There's 2 types of problems, because the pain is the problem. There's an actual pain, so think of like back pain. Thinking like having a medical condition to where you have to do something or there's gonna be severe consequences, okay? So there's a pain, and there's a second type of problem. And that problem's called an unfulfilled desire. So with pain, people are trying to go from a below average to average, from subpar to par. With an unfulfilled desire, they're going from average to excellence. And there's different states of energy in which you influence those people, okay? And in fact, I teach 2 syntaxes. One is we'll talk about later, problems first syntax, that's for pain. The other one is goals first syntax, that's for unfulfilled desires. But either of those will create what's called the gap. And we have to have that because this is the first of the 7 beliefs, and all of the other 6 are predicated on having this first. You cannot continue in the sales process until this is established, okay? So I always say this, you guys heard it in the training, but business is ultimately about solving problems, right? Because when you solve a problem, you create value, and then people exchange money for value. So if we know that to be true, then sales is really just the transference of certainty that you could solve the problem for somebody else, right? But if there's no problem, there's no sale. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to find the gap, isolate that, and then we want to put our shovel in the ground and start digging. So the next thing is doubt. So doubt is either the inability to fix the problem, or it's just the belief that they believe that going through the product, whatever that is going to be easier, faster, more effective, cheaper, more efficient, whatever, than doing it themselves. Really, this answers the question, why aren't they going to DIY? Why aren't they going to do it themselves, right? So if they don't have pain, the objection is they're not going to want it. If they don't have doubts, they're going to say, this sounds great, I totally agree, but I think I could just do this myself. Cost is that the cost of inaction is greater than the cost in the form of time, energy, money, attention, etc., to invest in said product or service, okay? So cost is like building leverage. Has anybody been to UPW? With Tony Robbins. So like one of the things he has you do there is the Dickens process, right? Where you imagine a behavior that's like kind of a negative behavior that you want to change, left unchanged, but you stretch it out for 5 or 10 years. And then you bring all that pain back to the present moment. So what he's doing is he's building massive leverage
So somebody makes a commitment to change. And in a lot of ways, you need to do this on your sales calls. And now granted, like if you're doing a B2B sale and you're selling, a company doing $1 million to $10 million, yeah, of course you're not gonna like walk them through the Dickens process, okay? But there needs to be the cost of change, or the cost of inaction, not the cost of change, has to be substantially greater past a certain threshold of the cost of investing in your program. And that's not just the money, but also that's the time, energy, attention, resources, right? Because a lot of times what you're selling, it's not just how much money they got to take to buy it, but they got to invest time into it. They might have to reallocate resources, all that stuff. So then we have desire. So desire is the compelling payoff that happens when they fix the problem. Okay, so you see how doubt, inability to fix the problem, cost is what happens if the problem left unchanged, desire is the compelling payoff to fix the problem. See how we can't establish these until we have the problem? So we have to get the problem first. Every single one is like that. So desire is very easy. Desire is your heaven island compared to your hell island. Hell island, your pain. Money is the resources and willingness to fix the problem. So again, it's predicated on the problem. So the resources is like, do they physically have the resources? If you have a 450 credit score and somebody with $800, they might not be able to buy a $10,000 program. Okay? Sure, they could get resourceful, but for our purposes, we're just going to say they didn't have the resources. Willingness is different. Willingness is they might have the resources, they're just simply not willing. So when I first started, I trained this dating coach, and essentially what this dating coach did is we were reviewing a call, and he was essentially he was trying to sell a lawyer who was having some issues with his dating on his dating program. And essentially what happened was the lawyer was making $250,000 a year. So the lawyer, he had the resources, but when he heard the price was $5K, he wasn't willing. Now, why wasn't he willing? That ties back into lack of cost. Does that make sense? So next one is support. So this one is essentially, do the people around them, close to them, and the other stakeholders in the decision support them in making a decision? So obviously this could be spouse and partner, right? This could be business partner. But this could also be a board. This could also be the CFO. And also this could be essentially the people implementing the project. So in like a B2B sale, and this actually happened with our company, I was thinking about buying something, and then what happened was when I took it to my team who was going to implement it, we were like, I kind of don't really have the bandwidth for this, so we held off on it, right? So we didn't have support. The salesperson didn't have the support. He didn't really pre-handle the objection of who's implementing this and are they going to have the bandwidth? Maybe if he did, we would have bought. So the last one is trust. And trust is really interesting. So the first 6 are covered in the discovery, and then trust is covered half in the discovery and half in the pitch, okay? So trust is 3 parts. There's trust in you, there's trust in the company, okay? But most importantly, there's trust in the methodology, okay? There's 2 sales on every sales call. There's the sale on the method and the sale on the product. Okay? So when I say trust in the methodology, the easiest way to think about it is if you think about Russell Brunson and ClickFunnels. He's not trying to, if you watch his presentations, he's not trying to sell you on ClickFunnels. He's trying to sell you that funnels are the best, most effective way to get customers online. Because by nature of believing that belief, you buy ClickFunnels as a byproduct. Does that make sense? So another great example of this is, let's say you're selling a program called the 4-Day Ketogenic Diet, right? So what you do is if you read a sales letter for the ketogenic diet, typically it's gonna first start to explain insulin resistance, then it's gonna start to explain ketosis, and it's gonna get you bought in on the idea that ketosis is the best, most effective way to lose weight, right? By the nature of believing that belief, you're going to buy a product on the ketogenic diet. Does that make sense? So a lot of times, let's say what we do here. A lot of our marketing for Remote Closing Academy is based on the fact that the fastest, most effective way to create financial freedom or to hit a certain level of income is not a lot of like the other business opportunities that people are pitched out there, but it's actually becoming a remote salesperson. So and by the nature of doing that, you're going to join to learn how to do that. right? So this is trust on the method. This is the biggest thing in a lot. I rarely see any sales trainers teach this, but copywriters talk about it all of the time, right? So it's trust in the methodology. It's trust. I also call this the thesis. Russell Brunson calls it the domino belief. Todd Brown calls it the central marketing thesis. Okay? So you see these terms, like people are coming to this same conclusion, that they have to have belief in the method. And I would say out of all of them, except for pain, this is the most important one, right? If I can really just get pain in this one, sometimes that's all you need. So, again, all of these are predicated about the problem. We already covered the whole saying I have about business is about solving problems. So here's how to install these beliefs, okay? So really, the sales process. We start with introduction. So introduction is the first phase. It has two parts, okay? It has rapport and it has frame. Then we go into information gathering. So information gathering has two different syntaxes you could do. Now here's the thing. You can technically execute the 7 beliefs in any order that you want. Like I said, like pretty much any sales process that I know, they do this, right? However, what I found when I was selling is I kind of always went in the same order or same one of 2 orders. And then when I started teaching, I was like, oh yes, like there's definitely, I have to give people an order to do these things, because what happens is if your questions are ordered the right way, they will tend to build upon each other and be more effective because of the context created by the prior questions, okay? So there's 2 things. Now, problems first syntax we use for what? Pain. Goals first we use for unfulfilled desires, right? So an unfulfilled desire might be somebody trying to go from 10% body fat to 5% body fat and compete on stage, right? Whereas problems first syntax, pain, might be somebody for, like, I used to sell real estate agents, oh my God, like I have no leads. I like have inconsistent, I'm on the business roller coaster, ups and downs, okay? Then we go into the transition. So the transition's purpose is to essentially go from asking questions to pitching our product and service in a way that doesn't create sales resistance. So one of the things I realized when I was coaching a lot of salespeople is that what they would do is they do the information gathering phase really well, and then they like jump into the pitch, and it's like, whoa, like you just went from like somebody who was understanding me and trusting me to like now you're like pitching me. It was kind of weird. So essentially with the transition, it's a way to transition where you're basically gonna get them to ask you to pitch them. And in a way that builds trust, what it also does at more of an advanced level, and I think this is what Brian's gonna talk about later, is it essentially tees up the pitch. It essentially gives the beliefs that they need to believe to be true for them to buy into the pitch, okay? Then there's the pitch, which we'll cover later. That's where you essentially explain your product or service. However, the biggest thing about your pitch is, again, the pitch is really establishing that 7th belief, which is trust, right? So what you want to do with your pitch is you want to make it the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different, okay? So again, the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. Again, if I try to sell you on the ketogenic diet, a great pitch for that is essentially me explaining to you insulin resistance. What happens when you have insulin resistance? You can't burn body fat. Your body's not in a body fat burning state. It's a body storing state. How you fix that is through getting in a state of ketosis, right? I'm not saying the ketogenic diet is what you should do or anything. I'm just saying I like carbs. But what I'm saying is, by the nature of me explaining to you what I'm selling, you understand why you failed in the past and why this is going to be different. Okay, that's huge. So you're basically providing an insight, right? And if you read books on selling, a lot of them, the challenger sale, insight selling, they all kind of come to these same conclusions. And then there's the committing phase. So the committing phase is essentially getting them tied down on the thesis, right? So objection handling is really getting them to buy the product if they have resistance. But the committing phase is essentially the objection handling for them getting bought into the thesis, them getting bought into the methodology, okay? Because what we want is we want them to believe that this is the right thing and now is the right time. If they believe this is the right thing, now is the right time, if they're bought in, let's say that funnels are the best way to get customers online, then when we move to pitching the product, it's like there's just so much consistency and there's so much forward momentum. It's very hard for them not to buy. But you have to do that in the committing phase. And then we price drop into objection handling. So prompts first syntax versus goals first syntax. I basically covered all of this. But again, prompts first is for pain. Goals first is for unfulfilled desire. So call flow. We're going to cover rapport and frame first. All right? So here's how rapport looks like. Now, again, this is kind of, I wrote this way back when it was actually pre-COVID. So I was doing a lot of audio call sales calls. I recommend Zoom now pretty much for everything, unless you're doing outbound. But this is what I use for audio, and it would still work for Zoom. So it's like, hey, is this John? Hey, this is just Cole here. What's up? And John says whatever. And then what I do is I usually share something that makes me relatable from my life. And don't overthink this. Almost what I say every time is yep, just got done, finished out with a workout, feeling really good, got the endorphins pumping, ready to talk to you. That might create some rapport or whatever, see what he says. And then I might say, having a good week so far, or had a good weekend, busy week, busy upcoming week. Something just very just throwing it out there. I'm not trying to seek rapport and, what's the weather? I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm just trying to have one or two volleys back and forth. This should take 30 seconds tops. And then I'm going to go to the next line, which is great. Well, I know we got a limited amount of time here, so you ready to jump in? You got a clean sheet of paper, something to take notes with? Now, the reason I ask that is because when you ask if they have a clean sheet of paper, something to take notes with, if it's an audio call, this sits them down into a buying situation, okay? So if it's audio, at first, this first 60 seconds, you can't really tell if they're driving, if they're at their son's baseball game, if they're you don't really know what they're doing. They could be walking outside. So what happens here is I can assess if they're in a true buying situation, because if somebody's driving, they're less likely to buy, right? Not saying they can't, but they're less likely, So this helps me see, and I can hear them and then it sits them down. Now they're really fully focused with me. Does that make sense? So then after that, after that we dive in. But a little trick you can use is if they're skeptical. Like when I sold these realtors, they scheduled a call, and I would call them, and they'd be like, "Oh, I totally forgot about this call," and then that's all they would say. And so what you want to do is you want to lean out and say, "Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, is now still a good time to connect?" And so when you say that, usually what's going to happen is essentially what you're doing. Imagine it this way. You're kind of moving out, and it's going to force them to step in, okay? Because almost always they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm really sorry. I just have had a crazy day, blah, 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 whatever." Cool. Well, do you have a clean sheet of paper, something to take notes with, ready to dive in? Now, he's frantically around the office. I can sit the person down and make them present. Does it make sense? So this is rapport is pretty simple, guys. However, you got a few nuances. Then we got frame the call. So there's kind of some sales trainers that are "Oh, framing the call is bad." There's others that are super strong with frame the call. What I've personally found is that it does help salespeople have the sense of control, okay? Especially if they're a little bit newer and they're not as good at taking the lead. As you get more advanced, you can experiment with removing it. Okay, I've done both. What I will say, though, is in a business context, it is very, very normal for any meeting in any business. If you look at my company, we have 100 people. Any meeting starts with somebody stating an agenda. So when people say, well, stating the agenda causes sales resistance, I'm well, I don't know. Any business meeting with a business context, it starts with stating the agenda. So it's kind of normal. And it's kind of weird if somebody doesn't state the agenda. So I talked to this banker from Goldman Sachs one time, and I was like, what is, working with Goldman Sachs, what is that like? And he was like, dude, it's if the very first thing to do in every single meeting is state the agenda, okay? So here's what I would say. And there's different versions of this, but I say, gotcha. So what I really found to work best on these calls is first diving deeper into the specifics of your business. So what's working right now, what's not working right now, and ultimately what you feel is really the biggest challenges that are keeping you from moving forward. And once we get some clarity there, if there's anything we can help with, I'm happy to share with you the details about what we have going on over here and how that works. Or if not, we could certainly give you a little bit of homework or point you in a different direction. Is that fair? And so also, it's kind of weird when you're a one-sided conversation. I'm also presenting. But you also notice how I pause when I say that. There's pauses and there's varyings of cadence, okay? So Owen will talk to you guys tomorrow. This is who I learned this from. is that when you want to really capture somebody's attention with your tonality, you want to do two things. You want to vary your cadence, and you also want to have a wide range of expression. So what happens when you're scripted and you're reading from a script is you typically have a monotone cadence, and it limits the range of expression. So like when I typically present, I will vary my cadence, and I try to widen the range of expression. And also when people are nervous, they tend to contract, you know? And as a salesperson, what you want to do is you really want to get something like this down. Like you're going to say this at the same time every single time. Don't like read it. Like just like kind of know what you're going to say and then like say it in a way that's natural and have some pauses. Like a great one is, see that word now? Now is a great word where when you say now, it's a direct command that brings us back to the present moment, right? Now, and then you pause. Once we get some clarity there, see, another pause. And you can just always kind of upward, downward inflection with your voice. Another person really good at this, his name is Jason Flagellant. He does it like very much on purpose. It's just really up and down, okay? So I get the little agreement here. They're like, yep, that's cool. And I say, cool. So that being said, probably our best place to start is what would you say is, I guess, the biggest challenge in your sales right now? Or like what's not working at least at the level you truly feel like it could be that it should? So you see how I also varied my cadence with that. And I say, that being said, pause. Probably our best place to start is what would you say? And then I say, biggest challenge. So, because when you kind of ask a lot of sales trainers, will like say that this is too direct of a question. But if I use my tonality and make challenge a question, it softens it. Like I haven't been able to find the words. And then at the end, when I say what's not working at level it truly could be that it should, that's another softener. Okay? Now sometimes if it's like maybe an unfulfilled desire, or like maybe you're helping somebody get PR, you're probably not going to ask like what's the biggest challenge in your business. So you can ultimately say something along the lines of like, which is very basic, like what stuck out to you about the ad that ultimately you wanted to reach out. Just something very basic like that. That's fine. That's a standard one. But also remember, everything's predicated on the problem. So if we're doing business coaching, if we're doing weight loss, if we're doing dating, I really like starting with something like this because it's just so much more like getting to the root of the issue right away. Okay? So either one of those is fine. So then we're going to go into goals first syntax. Now, we're not going to cover problems first syntax. Problems first is a little bit more complex to explain. Goals first is very easy. So goals first, we're going to go over the entire syntax, and I'm going to basically teach it to you guys in the context of if I'm selling Amazon FBA coaching, right? So it's somebody who maybe is not happy with their line of work, and they ultimately want to, do Amazon FBA so they can leave and get away from that, and ultimately it's an unfulfilled desire. It also is kind of a little bit of a, pain too. It's hybrid. It's a dichotomy. So first, isolate the challenge and why are they here? So probing and background questions. We'll get into this. So basically, we already covered this question. Again, sometimes if this is like weird, you're like, it doesn't really apply. You could just say, what did you see about the ad that prompted you to reach out? Okay. Now, when you ask this biggest challenge, okay, you want to let them obviously like speak it out, right? You guys know that. And then just, use tell me more. When you say blank, what do you mean exactly? How do you mean? You can repeat the last three words that you said. The last word, you can be like stress, or it just depends on what they say. You can just basically repeat it back as a question, and it gets them to expand. Okay? Now, what you also got to do in this section is after you kind of flush out the initial parts of the problem, what you need to do is you need to get background questions. Now, this wouldn't really apply probably in health or dating, but like in a lot of business stuff, I don't really even know how to navigate the conversation until I have good context. So I need to figure out like, okay, like if let's say it's a business, like what problem are you solving? For whom do you solve it for? How do you sell it? What's the price? And then how do you get clients? Like how does somebody go from a stranger to a paying client? Right? Because I have to understand like am I talking to a $10 million a year business who has this really elaborate acquisition system, or am I talking to somebody who's like at $50K a month and they have no acquisition? It just kind of depends. So we really need to understand like the deeper context of what's going on before we get into that. So this is very basic so far. Quick note on probing questions, just some basic ones here. Tell me more. When you say blank, what did you mean? You can restate their statement as a question. Your business is giving you stress. Why do you say that though? I mean, some of these are like pretty basic. And why is that important now though? one of my favorite ones, I learned this one from Jeremy Miner, is, has that put you in a tough position? In what way, though? So like, for instance, we'll cover how you use this later, but let's say somebody's like, yeah, last month I just made 5K a month. Just made 5K a month? You're like, oh yeah, it's kind of rough. I mean, can I ask you an honest question? Has that put you in a tough position? Yeah. In what way, though? So that's a great way. Like, sometimes we wonder how to like get into the emotional parts of the pain. That's a great way to do that. So that was pretty easy, right? Intro is pretty easy. Now we go into desired situation, also pretty easy. Now, in this section, as you can see, we go isolate the challenge, desired situation, current situation. Easiest syntax ever. I tried to like simplify it really, really well. Now here's the deal. You're probably like, well, dude, you set goals for syntax, but you started with isolate the challenge. I always like to just see kind of like, why are they here first? But with goals first, I quickly pivot to what's called the ultimate goal question, okay? Now, in this section, we want basically 4 outcomes. Ultimate goal, the monetary goal, long-term vision, and the non-monetary goal. Now, if it's not a business-related thing, it's fine. Like, you're not going to get revenue, but you just need to assign a number to it. Like right now, I'm actually reading this book on like problem solving and how to critically think about problems. And one of the things they said was the most important thing in terms of solving problems is assigning a number to the problem to clearly define it. Okay? So you need to do that with your prospects. And so it could be, if it's not a business thing, it could be how much weight do you want to lose? What do you weigh now? Or it could be how many dates do you want to go on versus how many dates are you going on now, etc. That book, I bulletproof problem solving. That's what it's called. It's honestly, I skimmed it. It was just very dense. It was like reading a physics book, basically.
Thanks for checking out part 1 of the video. Click here for part 2 on the information gathering phase of the sales process.